Now, I want to say a few words. You notice I've got Mr. Schiller up here on top. I did this as a courtesy to the LaRouche group, right? But what I'm going to be telling you here is not endorsed by anybody else. It's not endorsed by NASA. It's me, okay? I put these slides together. I have a number of friends in the agency who will agree with what I'm saying. But I don't want to attribute this. Just because I have Friedrich Schiller on the top does not mean that anybody in the Schiller group has endorsed this either. You may object to it. The other thing is, this talk I'm going to give you is eminently interruptible. If during the talk something looks strange or you want to have a little a question, ask the question right away. You don't have to hold it to the end. Just make sure the question is short and it's a question. There should be a question mark at the end. You don't put a dot in it. So, I'm going to be talking about where NASA was and also where we're going. And I hope I don't get cut off like I have in some other places. So, this is the iconic picture called Earthrise. It was taken from Apollo 8. And when the Apollo astronauts first went around the moon, they were totally out of contact from Earth. It was a little bit tense. I was tense, and so were some of my colleagues at NASA, because you have no idea what's happening on the other side of the moon. They could have crashed, something might have gone wrong, but it didn't. They came around the moon, and that's what they saw. They called it Earthrise. This picture was probably in every newspaper in the world, and it is the one of the remaining symbols of what we did in the moon program. Let's see, next slide here. In '69, we launched Apollo 11. I'm giving you folks these slides. They're available for anybody here who wants them. In '69, we launched Apollo 11 to go around the moon. 2 astronauts were going to land on the moon. Collins was going to stay behind in the capsule. By the way, something most people don't know. When this rocket took off, it did not go to the moon. It went in orbit around Earth, and then still didn't go to the moon. It went to where the moon would be 4.5 days later. So the moon was going to catch up. It takes 4.5 days to get to the moon. The moon goes around the Earth, so almost 25% of the distance away from where the moon was, that rocket aimed itself. Again, you're getting these slides. All these specs will be on there. It's a neat education to look and see what went into that, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. These are the components of the lunar lander. They were on top of the Saturn V. So if I go back right up here, that's all you see in the next page here. This is the command service module. This is a little rocket engine. Also has oxygen and other chemicals for propulsion. And this is the lander itself. 2 people landed. This is lunar module, CSM's command service module. This is one of the iconic pictures too. This is Buzz Aldrin. This is taken by Neil Armstrong, first man to the moon. And he's taking some experiments off of the lander after it had landed. This one is in black and white. We do have color pictures. This is one you probably all remember. And here that they're making footprints on the moon. The first human beings who have left their planet for another planet. This is a fantastic piece of history. Now you talked about Renaissance, okay? I think 500 years from now, people are going to be talking about the space program as a renaissance of humanity. This is when we got our technical act together. And I'm going to describe a lot about what we can do for humanity as a result of the space program. When we got up there, by the time we had Apollo 17, we had moon buggies. We were taking rides on the moon. by the way, I'm trying to think of Gene Cernan, who was the driver of the buggy right here. He dropped a hammer on one of the fenders here. And you see the dust that's being kicked up? Well, that dust kicked up from the broken fender. They radioed down to Earth, hey, we need some help here. They had a duplicate in a laboratory in Houston. And they figured out where they would need to put duct tape to fix that fender, and they did. Right? But so duct tape was used on the moon. However, you'll see in a minute the astronauts got pretty dirty in the process. They found a lot of things, lunar rocks. Here's one that Jack Schmidt picked up. And you notice there's a little piece of quartz inside it. You see it's inside here. And this was basically showing that the moon had the same kind of volcanism that we have here on Earth. So we are truly sister planets going around the sun. Well, Jack was a great, Jack was the first geologist, a true scientist going to the moon, as opposed to most of the other Apollo astronauts were test pilots. And he had to be pretty gutsy to do that. They were looking for test pilots who happened to be that way. But Jack was a scientist, and he was here to pick up the rocks. And then he radios back, hey, I found a real good rock, but I don't think I can fit it. So that's Jack right there. Harrison Schmidt with the rock he wanted to take back. Now he settled for the little one that you saw on the previous slide. Schmidt also took this picture, and this is on the return to Earth. Remember, this flight took place in December. And so you see the southern hemisphere is tilted. You see all of Antarctica being lit up by the sun. You see the green band of vegetation across Africa, the Sahara Desert clearly show up. This is South Africa. This is the Namibian desert. So you can see Earth as it really is. And this photograph, again, was all over the world. It's called the Blue Marble. And this is on the way back they took this picture. Jack was pretty happy. He got all his rocks except for that big one. This is what he looked like coming back. And that's what I mean by dirt. The fender splashed up all kinds of moon dust. So he carried this moon dust back. When he landed and they took him out of the capsule, they took a vacuum cleaner and ran it over the spacesuit so they could collect the dust, so they could study that too. And it wasn't just the rocks he was picking up. He was a big supporter of it. You're going to see him more recently in a few more slides. But I want to get into the contributions that NASA made. And these are the fields that I'm going to talk about. The second A in NASA stands for aeronautics. NASA has done a lot of things in making aircraft safer and things like that. And chemistry, clothing, all these things. Where NASA excelled was technology management. That was probably the greatest strength. NASA didn't build a lot of these things. Grumman built the lunar lander. Boeing, McDonnell Douglas built the other parts. American industry built the equipment, but it was managed by NASA. So let's take a look at aeronautics. You notice if you fly aircraft near the ends of runways, you see these big circular structures. They are called wind shear detectors. And what they do is they alert a pilot if they're coming in for a landing, if all of a sudden, as the plane lands, a crosswind is going to sweep them off the runway and things like that. NASA pioneered that. NDT stands for non-destructive testing. It's one thing, if you have a turbine blade in a jet engine, and you can stress it until it breaks, and you say, okay, now we know how it's going to break. Well, you want to make sure that these blades are safe in aircraft and without destroying them. So NASA developed fluorescent dyes that you can spray on a turbine blade. And if a crack is beginning to develop, the crack will show up as it fluoresces. So that way you don't have to destroy the turbine blade when you periodically look at an engine. It makes aircraft flying much, much safer. Lots of things, also strength of materials. You want to find out whether aluminum can take a certain stress or not. You don't need to destroy it in the process. That's what NDT is. HFT is human factors training. We learned that there was a lot of interaction between astronauts when they're in space. There's a human beings, they talk to each other. Apollo 7 carried 3 astronauts up who had colds. They didn't know they had colds when they took off, but they developed while they were in space. And it's very hard to blow your nose with a space helmet. There are a lot of irritations between people that happen when you're in a closed, confined space and you're irritated yourself because of something. So human factors training, they've taken to pilots in aircraft so that they detect the interaction between pilot and co-pilot and the stewardesses and the crew and things like that. And they've studied them, they've come up with strategies how to make things easier on aircraft, particularly in an emergency. And you can do that in flight simulators, and you simulate an emergency, and you see how people react to each other. And you don't need to wait until the plane crashes to do that. You do it while you're in a simulator. Lightning effects. Lots of aircraft get struck by lightning. Very few aircraft crash because of lightning. And they have ways to insulate the electronics in aircraft, and NASA worked on that. Also, the fixes on the space hatch door. You remember the Apollo fire that killed 3 astronauts was a total tragedy. Number one, they had a pure oxygen atmosphere in the capsule, but later on they changed it. But the astronauts couldn't get out. The hatch door was sealed from the outside. Not good. So they fixed those. Heat shield systems were tried and tested. International Space Station had structural integrity that was helped by NASA to make sure that the parts that different countries are making, Canada made a module, Japan made a module, that they fit together, that they were strong, that they wouldn't come apart. All that was done. So that's one set. Chemistry. Most of the plastic wraps you use today have been improved by NASA research. Now, there's some plastic wraps that I buy in a supermarket. I can't get the damn things off. They're so damn strong. I think they overdo it on certain areas, but that was part of the things that NASA helped with. Carbon fiber materials ended up getting into, architects use them now to make buildings stronger. We originally intended them to make spacecraft stronger, but now they're used all over the world. They're used in cars, they're used in boats. Lots of combinations of metals that make things stronger and lighter. Weight was a big deal in the space program. The reason I'm not an astronaut, these are one of the reasons, all right, is that I'm too tall. You have to be 5'11" or shorter to be an astronaut. Why? Because they wanted to save weight. And now they have better ways to do it. In the space shuttle, you didn't have to worry about it. I could have flown the space shuttle, but then I was too old. And I wasn't working for them anymore either. So, battery development, fuel cell development, all were pushed and sponsored and perfected with NASA help, including maneuvering spacecraft and environmental chemistry. Clothing. Lots of high-tech, we had to make spacesuits that could withstand a micrometeorite, that wouldn't explode. So we had to have material that could deform and absorb shock. Well, guess what? That helps design bulletproof clothing for police officers, bulletproof clothing for military people. So you can fire a bullet at it, and the fabric itself disperses the energy that gets hit. So that's very important. Excuse me, lightweight insulation. Fastening systems, everybody knows about Velcro, right? Velcro was one of the contracted products that NASA did. There's lots of other ways to fasten clothing, and NASA is pioneered in that. So those are what I call spacesuit technology spin-offs. And the bullet resistor I just talked about. All right, why do we develop transistors and microchips? One of the reasons was, again, saving weight. Vacuum tubes are very, very heavy. Transistors were one way there. Integrated circuits were even better and operate faster. Antenna development, we now have TV receivers on your roof that wouldn't be there were it not for the advances in antennas that we made, being able to communicate with a vessel 250,000 miles away. Okay, worldwide GPS you guys are aware of. Lots of remote sensing that the military uses. When I joined the agency, I was a meteorologist before I joined NASA. I was involved in the first of the TIROS projects. TIROS was the first satellite that actually took pictures of cold fronts, warm fronts, low pressure systems. For meteorology, it was fantastic. So imaging systems, photovoltaics.
While we're at it, these fancy things here could be weaponized by the military.
The imaging systems, remote sensing, optical and electromagnetic. Now, this is how we can tell what's going on in the world. We can tell if another country has had an atomic test because we can look for ionization remnants in the atmosphere that let us know someone set off an atomic bomb. And that can be done from a satellite. We have infrared sensing. We can see where heat is being generated on Earth, all from satellites. NASA helped develop them. Again, private industry development, but NASA sets out the RFP. RFP stands for Request for Proposals, and we look for technology, and we support the ones that we think will work.
Just on that, RFP, Request for Proposals?
Yes.
So NASA requested that private industries make proposals?
No.
Or makes a proposal to be fulfilled?
NASA sets out a request for a proposal. We want industry to propose a solution to a problem that we designate. The proposals come in, and we try to analyze them, and then we award a contract to the company that we think has the best chance of succeeding in what we're trying to do. Sometimes we have two competing groups move further along the line, and then later on we weed them out. But the government does it. I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail in 2 more slides. All right, so you'll get a better answer to that question. We've had, first of all, the Hubble Space Telescope. Even we had to send 5 fixes before we got it right. But the Hubble has opened up the universe to us in a way that it could not have done from Earth. We're the only species on this planet that can put something into space, look across the universe in different wavelengths of light, figure out what's there, and try to theorize how it came to be. No other creature on the planet can do that. And this is where I think humanity needs to celebrate itself. Sure. A lot of times we will do something that says, well, we want to protect a certain species from going extinct. That's a good thing to do, but I want to protect humans from going extinct.
Yeah.
Because we make this planet work. We have 250 robotic rover and lander missions. We have visited every planet in the solar system, either landed on it or flown by it, or crashed into it. Yeah, sometimes we crash in on purpose, and we have sensors on the way down to tell us what's going on. We've done it in Jupiter a couple of times, and once on Saturn too. Again, the antenna helps us receive transmissions. Camera data transmission improvements. We can send a picture back faster now than we ever could before, because we multiplex some of these signals. We have higher data rates. We've looked at the lunar rocks. We haven't gone to Mars and picked up rocks. However, we have found rocks on Antarctica that we believe came from Mars. From a meteor that would hit the Martian surface, then these rocks, because of their characteristics, we can pick them out and we can look at them and say, yeah, this is definitely a piece of, we have 14 of those so far that we found on Antarctica that we almost certainly came from Mars. And when we go to Mars, and we're going to be talking about that, we're going to know for sure. Let's see, near Earth orbit asteroid monitoring is something that we weren't doing. NASA has pioneered. We do have a handle on asteroids that come close to Earth. Usually you read about it in the paper a few days. At NASA we know about it a number of weeks before. If anything serious was going to happen, the whole world would be alerted. If we're lucky, they hit the Pacific Ocean, and we don't have to worry about it too much. Solar observations are very important. We've learned an awful lot about the sun, much, much more than we ever knew in all the 10,000 years that we were doing solar observations. You can't walk into a hospital today and not be touched by something that NASA has done. The technology of medicine has enormously improved. Of course, we were interested in the health and well-being of astronauts on the way to the moon or in space. Now we had a way to monitor that. Infrared temperature sensing, remote sensing. You can go to a hospital now, they don't need to touch you, they don't need to have any saliva, you can just stick a thermometer in your ear and tell you instantly what the temperature is. Artificial limb design improvements. We were building things in space. We found out ways to design multiple repetitive motion devices, like you see on the lunar lander, on the rovers, and those have found practical applications on hip replacements, knee replacements, things like that. Lots of improvements in basic research. We now know where every planet is, where every moon of every planet is. That's what I mean by solar system metrics. We have measured that now with high precision. So astronomy has been advanced, communication and bandwidth enhancement. I've talked about the aviation systems, meteorology, which is my favorite thing. We have so many advances now due to satellite reporting and things like that. Meteorology is a totally different profession now. Yes, sir?
What does bandwidth enhance?
Bandwidth, if a radio signal is given, it vibrates at a certain frequency. We can make a frequency operate within a frequency. That's called multiplexing. So you can use the same bandwidth, the same radio band, and get multiple signals on it. We can use optical communication. I can shine light, like a light here, and I can actually transmit information through that light, as opposed to using a radio set. So a lot of advancements in communication, in electronics, that NASA pioneered and then spread throughout the world. All right, here's something NASA did which is really unique. Except when security was a problem, if you did something for NASA, you had to make that patent available for everybody. It was called open patents, so that you could not build something for NASA and then make money on it and exclude other people from using the same technology. That's what a patent really is. A patent allows you to prevent someone else for making an item that you have invented. Can't do that with NASA. Our patents are open. If you design a lunar lander leg, you can design a lunar lander leg on your own without having to pay Grumman a royalty. All right? CPFF and CPIF. CPFF stands for cost plus fixed fee. A lot of times, we want to develop something, we didn't know whether it could happen or not. So we said, look, we want you to research this. We'll pick up all your costs, and we'll give you a certain fixed fee for trying to develop this so that we can make something work. Cost plus incentive fee is the other. If we wanted something that had to be done within a certain time frame and you did it faster, we would give you an incentive fee. So there was an incentive for you to do something better. And a lot of times, we would ask for something that we didn't know could happen, and if it did happen, we gave you more money. These are contracting principles that now have spread throughout the government. Other agencies do it, but NASA pioneered these. PERT systems, PERT is Program Evaluation and Review Technique. These are systems that allow us to track multiple things at the same time to see if they're on schedule, if they're behind schedule, if they're ahead of schedule, if something is falling behind that we need taken care of. Sometimes you put an incentive fee on a contract, change it so that things happen, and that's what change order systems are. Basically, that is the contracts that NASA allowed for changes as you made progress. We saw something else need to be done. We wanted to be able to change the systems and change the contracts, and then NASA worked very hard to make that work. KT stands for Kepler-Trego and other problem-solving systems. Kepler-Trego is a deviation analysis system. We found out what happened to Apollo 13 when all the evidence was gone. We had an oxygen tank blow up on the way to the moon. The astronauts were saved by using the lunar lander as a lifeboat. We went around the moon once, took them back to Earth. But we needed to find out what happened, and when the capsules ended up entering the atmosphere, they all burned up. So we had no hard evidence, and yet, using this deviation analysis process, we were able to figure out exactly what happened to Apollo 13 so that Apollo 14 wouldn't have the same thing happen. And it was done just by looking at the deviations in the data that was transmitted to us from the spacecraft. Cost and schedule performance, this is now done in contracts all over the place, measuring your ability to make something on time and make it right.